The stars stretched across the dark sky like endless rivers of light. The shuttle descended through the thin clouds, shaking as it entered the atmosphere of the war-torn planet. Inside, Mark sat with his squad, silent and steady, though his mind carried questions heavier than the rifle on his lap. Mark was a soldier, trained to follow orders, but his mission here was different. This was not just about weapons and war. The command wanted humans to talk with the alien tribes, to find allies in this dangerous part of the galaxy. Mark was not a diplomat, but he had something his commanders trusted: courage and the ability to survive where others could not. The shuttle landed on hard ground, dust flying around the squad as they stepped out. The planet was rough and broken, filled with jagged rocks and strange red plants that swayed even when the wind was still. Old ruins stood like broken teeth. Across the land, proof that battles had scarred this world for years. The humans moved carefully, rifles ready, scanning every shadow. Mark's friend Tom muttered as they walked. "Feels like the ground itself wants us gone," Tom said, his eyes sweeping the horizon. Mark nodded but stayed quiet. He knew the danger was not in the land. It was in the people who ruled it, and one name kept echoing in every story they had heard before landing. Tora, the alien warlord. 11 feet tall, armored not only in steel, but in reputation. Her name carried fear, even in whispers. Other alien clans spoke of her as a conqueror. Some called her ruthless. Others called her a leader with unbreakable honor. No human had seen her up close and lived long enough to tell the tale. The squad set up camp near a ridge. Their mission was simple on paper: establish contact, learn the alien intentions, and survive until the next pickup. But paper never carried the weight of reality. Mark felt it in his chest, a pressure that grew stronger with every passing hour. By nightfall, they saw lights across the ridge. Fires burned in the distance, not like small campfires, but great flames that stretched high as if calling every creature nearby to witness power. The squad tensed. "Looks like company," Tom said. The officer in charge, Captain Ryan, raised his hand. "Hold position. Watch. Do not engage unless fired upon." But the choice was not theirs to make. From the darkness, shapes moved. Massive shadows walked between the fires. Their steps shook the ground. Aliens came, tall and broad, some carrying spears longer than a human was tall. Others with strange, glowing blades that hummed in the night air. And then she came. Tora. Mark's breath caught when he saw her. She was taller than the others, towering above them like a living fortress. Her armor was black and silver, carved with marks of battles long past. Her eyes glowed faintly in the firelight, sharp and unblinking. In one hand she carried a massive axe, its edge reflecting the flames. She walked with the calm of someone who knew no fear, someone who had crushed every challenge before her. The humans raised their weapons. But the captain called out, "Stand firm." Tora stopped a short distance away. Her warriors spread out, surrounding the humans but not attacking. It was a silent wall of power. Humans, Tora's voice carried like thunder, deep and strong. "You step on my ground." Mark's heart raced. This was the moment. He had to speak, or blood would be spilled before the night ended. "We come." "For peace," he called back, his voice steady, though his chest felt heavy. "We seek understanding, not war." Tora tilted her head, studying him. For a moment, silence held the night. Then she raised her axe and pointed it at Mark. "Step forward," she commanded. The squad looked at him. Tom whispered, "Don't do it." But Mark knew he had to. Slowly he lowered his rifle and walked forward, the dirt crunching beneath his boots. He stopped a few steps away from her, craning his neck to look up at her towering figure. "You speak for your kind?" she asked. "I speak because someone must," Mark replied. His voice was firm, though his body felt small before her shadow. A sound like a laugh rumbled from her chest, low and sharp. "Brave or foolish?" Without warning, she swung her axe. Mark raised his blade to block, instinct driving him. The clash echoed like thunder, sparks flew. His arms shook under the weight of her strike. He pressed with all his strength, his teeth gritted, but the alien warlord was too strong. With a single squeeze, She crushed his blade. Metal shattered like glass, falling to the dirt in broken pieces. Mark staggered back, staring at the fragments in shock. The humans shouted, raising rifles, but Tora raised one hand to stop her warriors. Her glowing eyes never left Mark. "You fought me," she said. Her voice was calm, but beneath it was a strange tone, not anger, not cruelty. Something else. "You faced me with steel. Few dare." Mark's chest heaved as he caught his breath. He thought she would finish him, that his life would end in this place, broken like his blade. But instead, she leaned close, her voice carrying not just to him, but to every ear present. "You are mine," she declared. The words struck harder than her axe. Mark's squad froze. The alien warriors let out shouts of approval, stamping their weapons against the ground. "What do you mean?" Mark asked, his voice low. "You live because I say so," Tora answered. "Your courage is mine. Your fate is mine. From this day, you are hers." She touched her chest with a fist, marking herself. The air seemed heavier. Mark did not know what to say. Was it a claim of ownership? Was it protection? Was it something beyond human understanding? The squad waited, their rifles trembling in their hands, unsure if they should fire or hold. Mark stood in silence, meeting Tora's eyes. In that moment, he realized one truth. She could have killed him, but she had not. Instead, she had chosen him, for reasons hidden behind her unyielding gaze. Tora turned to her warriors. "Take them. They are not prey. They are mine." The aliens moved forward, not with weapons raised, but with the heavy steps of guardians carrying out their leader's will. The humans were surrounded, outnumbered, and outmatched. They could fight and fall, or they could follow and live. Mark glanced at his broken blade in the dirt, then at Tora's towering figure. Something inside him whispered that this was not the end. This was the beginning. And so he walked forward, not as a prisoner, not as a defeated man, but as someone who had stepped into the unknown. Tora's shadow covered him as she turned toward her campfires. The night burned brighter, and the path ahead was no longer in human hands. It belonged to her. The march to Tora's camp began under a cold sky. The alien warriors surrounded the humans, walking with heavy steps that shook the ground. Their weapons glowed faintly, humming with strange energy. Mark's squad moved in silence, rifles still. In their hands, but lowered, for even they knew there was no use raising them now. Mark walked at the front, close behind Tora. Her tall figure led the way, the firelight of her camp flickering ahead like a promise of something unknown. His blade had been broken, his strength tested and judged, and now he carried no weapon but his own will. Tom moved beside him, whispering in a tense voice. "She said you're hers. What does that even mean? You think she's planning to keep us alive, or just saving us for later?" Mark kept his eyes forward. "I don't know. But if she wanted us dead, we would already be gone." The other soldiers muttered quietly, fear and confusion in their tones. They did not trust this march. They did not trust the towering aliens around them. But Mark could feel something different. Tora had not spoken as a conqueror mocking prey. Her voice had carried weight like law spoken from the earth itself. At last they reached her camp. It was no small outpost. It was a fortress built of stone and metal, with walls that rose like cliffs and fires that burned high into the night. Hundreds of alien warriors moved within, their armor shining, their eyes sharp. Drums pounded in the distance, a slow rhythm that made the ground seem alive. The humans were led through the gates. Everywhere they looked, alien eyes followed. Some looked with curiosity, others looked with anger. Many whispered in their strange language. Though the tone was clear enough, confusion about why their great leader had brought humans into their midst, alive. Tora walked straight to the center of the camp, where a great fire burned brighter than the rest. She turned and faced her warriors, raising one hand for silence. The crowd obeyed at once. "These are not our enemies," she declared, her voice carrying across the camp. "They are mine." The words sent a ripple through the crowd. Some shouted in agreement, pounding their weapons. Others growled in protest, voices rough with disapproval. One warrior stepped forward, tall and broad, his armor scarred from battle, His eyes burned as he glared at Mark, and then at Tora. "Why?" the warrior demanded. "Why do you bring these weak ones here? Why claim them as yours when they have no place among us?" The crowd rumbled in agreement. Mark stood still, his heart heavy, but his legs steady. Tora looked at the warrior with calm fire in her eyes. "Because they have courage," she answered. She gestured toward Mark. "This one stood before me." He raised his blade and faced death. "Few of you would do the same." Her words silenced some, but not all. The warrior spat on the ground. "He is small. He is weak. Crush him now and show us strength." Tora stepped forward, towering over him. Her voice dropped deep and sharp. "Do you challenge me?" The warrior froze. His eyes shifted, and the crowd grew quiet. To challenge Tora was not a small thing. It was to risk everything. "I do not," he said at last. Lowering his gaze, Tora turned away from him without another word, her control unquestioned. She pointed toward Mark, her voice loud again. "From this day he is mine. His courage is proof. His life is under my hand. Any who raise blade against him, raise blade against me." The crowd broke into shouts, some of support, others of anger, but none stepped forward again. Tora then looked at Mark directly, her gaze steady. "You walk among my people now. You will live because I will it. But know this, human you are watched." Mark nodded slowly. "I understand." That night, the humans were given a space near the great fire, guarded on all sides. They were not prisoners locked in chains, but neither were they free. Alien eyes followed them with suspicion, some even with open hatred. Tom sat beside Mark as the flames burned, his voice low. "Do you really think she means to protect us, or are we just her trophies?" Mark stared into the fire. "I don't think it's that simple. She didn't see us as prey. She saw something else. I don't know what yet." Around them, alien warriors laughed, shouted, and pounded drums. The sound of a warlike people filled the camp. But above it, all was Tora, seated on a stone seat near the fire, her presence like an unshakable mountain. She spoke little, but her eyes moved often to Mark, as though measuring him still. The next day, Mark saw more of the camp. Warriors trained with massive weapons, their movements fast and precise despite their size. Craftsmen shaped armor with glowing tools, forging steel that gleamed in the sun. Hunters returned with strange beasts, their hides carried on poles, their meat cooked over fires. This was not just a war band, it was a people, alive with purpose, strong and unyielding. Yet even here division ran deep. Noticed it in the way some warriors looked at Tora with doubt in their eyes. He heard whispers carried by tone more than words, hints of disagreement. Perhaps even plans against her rule. In the afternoon he was summoned. 2 guards led him to Tora's seat, where she stood waiting. "You will walk with me," she said simply. He followed her through the camp, the guards keeping their distance. They climbed a ridge that overlooked the land beyond. The sun cast long shadows over the jagged rocks, painting the world in shades of red and gold. Tora spoke without turning. "You wonder why you live?" Mark stayed quiet a moment, then answered honestly. "Yes, I don't understand why you spared me." She stopped and faced him. Her eyes glowed faintly in the light. "Strength is not only in size. You raised a blade against me, when others would have fled. You lost, but you did not bend. That is a strength my people respect. That is why you live." Mark met her gaze, steady. "And when you said I was yours, what did you mean?" Tora crossed her arms. "It means you stand under my hand. No one here may kill you. It means you are bound to me, till I release you. Your fate is tied to mine." He frowned slightly. "Sounds like I'm your prisoner." Her expression did not change. "A prisoner fights for freedom. You are not chained. You walk because I allow it. You may speak, you may eat, you may learn. This is no prison. This is claim." Mark thought about her words. Claim. The sound of it carried weight, but it was not cruel. It was not the mark of a tyrant. It was something deeper, though he did not yet understand what. "And if I refuse?" he asked. Tora's voice lowered. "Then you die. Not by my hand, but by theirs." She gestured toward the camp below, where alien warriors moved like rivers of steel. They do not trust you. They do not care for you. Only my word keeps your heart beating here. You refuse my hand? Mark stood in silence. He thought of his squad, of Tom and the others who looked to him, thought of their mission of survival in this strange land. Slowly he shook his head. No, I don't refuse. A sound like approval rumbled in her chest. Good. They stood in silence for a moment, the wind moving across the ridge. Then Tora spoke again, softer. There is a storm coming. My people are divided. Enemies rise beyond these lands. If you are wise, human, you will see this is not about you alone. It is about survival for us all. Mark listened carefully, could hear the weight of truth in her words. She was not just a warlord claiming trophies. She was a leader carrying the burden of her people. When they returned to the camp, Tora addressed her warriors once more. She spoke in her language this time, her voice sharp and commanding. Though Mark could not understand the words, he could feel the power in them. The crowd listened, shouted back, and pounded their weapons in rhythm. Later that night, Tom asked quietly, "So what now? Are we really hers?" Mark looked at the fire, the sound of drums echoing in his ears. For now, yes. But I think it means more than we understand. We're not just prisoners. We're part of something bigger. And we need to find out what. As the flames burned and the camp roared with life, Mark felt the truth of it settle inside him. His blade had been broken, his fate claimed. And now every step forward would shape not only his future, but perhaps the future of all humans on this world. And though he did not know why, he felt certain of one thing: this was only the beginning. The camp rose early with the sun. Drums echoed across the stone walls, and the smell of smoke filled the air as fires were lit for cooking. Warriors trained in the open space, their heavy weapons cutting through the morning light. The sound of metal on metal, of roars and shouts, carried through the camp like the heartbeat of a restless army. Mark woke to the noise. He sat up, brushing dust from his uniform. His squad was near, though their eyes still carried unease. Tom stretched beside him, shaking his head. These people never sleep. Tom muttered. Mark stood and looked across the camp. Tora was already awake. She stood at the center watching her warriors spar. Her tall frame caught the sunlight, and her armor gleamed. She did not move often, but her very presence seemed to guide the warriors. Not long after, a horn sounded. The camp grew silent, and all eyes turned to the center fire. Tora stepped forward, her voice ringing across the ground. Strength must be proven. Loyalty must be earned. Today, trials will decide who walks as my true warriors. The crowd shouted in response, raising their weapons high. Mark felt the energy of it shake the ground. He thought this was only for her people, but then her eyes found him. You, she said, pointing straight at him. You will take the trials. Mark froze. His squad muttered in shock. Tom whispered harshly, "She's going to get you killed." But Tora's voice left no room for argument. If you walk under my hand, then you must prove you are not hollow. You will face the tests. The crowd roared with approval, though many shouted not in support, but in eager anticipation of his failure. Mark looked at Tora, meeting her gaze. He could refuse, but then he knew what would happen. The camp would turn on him. She had given him protection, but now she gave him a chance to prove himself. "I'll do it," Mark said, his voice steady. The first trial began at once. He was led to the training ground, where a wide circle had been cleared. Warriors gathered around, their voices rising in shouts and chants. At the center of the circle stood a tall alien with broad shoulders and a scar across his face. His weapon was a long staff tipped with blades. "This is the trial of balance," Tora explained. "Stand against him. Endure without falling." Mark held no weapon, only a wooden staff placed in his hands. The warrior across from him smiled coldly, certain of victory. The horn sounded. The warrior struck first, his staff sweeping fast and heavy. Mark barely blocked, the impact jarring his arms. He stepped back, his boots scraping dirt. Blow after blow came, heavy and relentless. The crowd shouted louder with each strike. Mark's strength was nothing compared to his opponent's, but he had speed. He ducked, twisted, and shifted his weight. The staff grazed him, cutting his arm, but he stayed standing. His breaths came fast, sweat dripping down his face, but he would not fall. Minutes stretched into long moments. His arms ached, his chest burned, but he kept his footing. Then, when the warrior lunged too far, Mark sidestepped and struck with his own staff, not with force, but with precision. The warrior stumbled, losing balance, and fell to one knee. The crowd erupted, some in cheers, others in anger. Tora raised her hand for silence. He endures. He does not fall. He passes the first trial. Mark dropped his staff, chest heaving, but a small fire lit inside him. He had survived. The second trial came soon after. He was led to a pit lined with stone. Inside were strange beasts, creatures with long limbs and sharp claws, their eyes glowing red. "This is the trial of the hunt," Tora said. "Survive the beasts. Show cunning." The gate opened and Mark stepped inside. The beasts hissed, circling him. His only weapon was a spear of rough wood. The first beast lunged, fast as lightning. Mark dodged, rolling across the dirt, and struck with the spear. The tip scraped its side, making it roar. The other beasts joined, moving as one. Mark's mind raced. He could not match them in strength, but he could use their own speed against them. He dodged again, placing himself near the stone wall. When one beast leaped, he shifted, and it slammed into the wall with a crash. Dust rose, the creature dazed. Mark thrust his spear, striking deep. The crowd roared from above, voices rising like thunder. Mark stood, panting, as the other beasts circled. His arm bled from scratches, but his eyes burned with determination. He fought on, not with raw power, but with timing. He used the beasts' momentum, tricking them into striking one another, forcing them into the walls, waiting for the right moments to strike. At last the final beast lay still, and Mark stood alone, bloodied but breathing. Tora raised her voice again. He survives. He shows cunning. He passes the second trial. Crowd's roar was louder now. Some shouted in respect, others still doubted. But Mark could feel the shift. He was no longer seen as only weak. The third trial was the hardest. He was led to a circle of fire, where 4 warriors waited. Each carried a weapon, sword, axe, spear, and shield. "This is the trial of spirit," Tora said. "Face them. Do not surrender. Stand until the end."
Orcs.
Chest tightened. 4 against 1. He had nothing but a short blade given to him. But he stepped into the circle, his heart steady. The warriors came at once. Mark blocked the first strike, ducked the second, but the third caught his shoulder. Pain burned through him. He staggered but did not fall. They pressed him hard. Sparks flew as blades clashed. Mark's body screamed with exhaustion, but his mind sharpened. He did not fight them head-on. Instead, he moved, forcing them to clash with each other, turning their strength into weakness. The crowd shouted wildly as the fight dragged on. Mark's arms ached, his body cut and bruised, but he refused to surrender. He blocked, dodged, and struck when he could. Minutes felt like hours. His vision blurred, but his feet stayed firm. At last the horn sounded. The trial was over. Mark fell to one knee, breathing hard, his blade still in his hand. The 4 warriors stood around him, some bleeding, all staring at him with new respect. Tora raised both arms. Her voice thundered over the camp. He stands. He does not surrender. He passes the third trial. Crowd erupted. This time, there were fewer shouts of anger and more of respect. Warriors pounded their weapons against the ground, their voices rising in a chant. Mark looked up at Tora. She stood tall, her eyes fixed on him, glowing like fire in the dusk. He could not read her full meaning, but he saw something he had not seen before, glimmer of approval. That night, the camp was alive with energy. Fires burned high, drums pounded, and warriors shouted in celebration. The humans were given food, though most still kept distance. Mark sat near the fire, his wounds wrapped, his body aching, but his spirit steady. Tom sat beside him, shaking his head in disbelief. I don't know how you're still alive. You should have been dead 10 times today. Mark smiled faintly. Maybe, but I'm not. From across the fire, Tora watched. Her gaze was sharp, but there was a weight behind it, like thought deeper than words. She had tested him, and he had not broken. Later, she approached him, her steps heavy, her presence commanding silence from those nearby. She looked down at him, her voice low but strong. You stood? You endured. You showed spirit? Many doubted, but now they have seen. Mark looked up at her. His voice was tired but steady. Did I prove myself to you? Tora's eyes narrowed slightly, then softened with the faintest spark. You proved yourself to all. You are mine, not by word alone, but by trial. From this day, no warrior may call you weak. The camp roared again, but Mark's mind was quiet. He knew the trials had not only been about survival, they had been about loyalty, about trust, about proving he belonged under her hand. And though his body hurt, a strange strength rose within him. He was not just a human among giants anymore. He was part of something larger. Tora turned to her people, raising her axe high. This human stands with us. His courage is ours. His strength is ours. He is mine, and by that, he is one of us. The crowd shouted in agreement. The chant rose again, louder, filling the night with fire and thunder. Mark sat, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of her words. He had passed the trials. He had survived the test of loyalty. But in his heart, he knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of a greater storm. The days after the trials passed with heavy rhythm. Mark's body still carried cuts and bruises, but the pain had become part of him now, a reminder of what he had endured. The alien camp no longer looked at him only with doubt. Some nodded when he passed. Others spoke small words that he could not fully understand but carried the sound of respect. Still, not everyone accepted him. There were warriors who turned away, their eyes sharp with distrust. Some muttered that Tora's decision was weakness, that humans had no place here. Mark knew the camp was divided. He could feel the cracks running through it like lines in stone waiting to break. One evening, as the fires burned and drums beat low, Tora summoned her council. Mark was brought with her, though his squad stayed behind. Inside a great tent of dark cloth, leaders of different clans sat in a circle. Their armor was heavy, their scars deep, their voices strong. Tora stood in the center, her axe across her back. The time is close, she said. Our enemies gather beyond the ridge. They prepare to strike, not only at me, but at all who live under my banner. If we do not stand together, we will fall. Murmurs filled the tent. A tall warrior with red markings across his face spoke. You ask us to follow you again, but many believe you place too much faith in outsiders. This human you protect, he is not one of us. Why should we bleed beside him? Another leader, smaller but sharp-eyed, nodded. Your claim is heavy. To tie a human to us is to risk shame if he fails. We must think of the people, not of strange bonds. Mark listened in silence. He understood none of their full words, but he felt their eyes on him. The weight of judgment pressing like a stone. Tora's voice cut through the noise. He stood where many of you would not. He faced the trials and did not break. He belongs because I say so, but also because he proved it. Still the council wavered. Some spoke in support, others in doubt. At last, Tora turned to Mark. Speak, she commanded. Mark hesitated, then stepped forward. His voice was steady, though he knew every word mattered. I am not here to take your place. I am not here to rule. I am here because we need each other. My people face the same danger as yours. The enemy that comes will not stop at your gates or mine. They will destroy all. If you fight divided, you will fall. If you fight together, you may win. Silence followed. Some eyes softened, others remained hard. But his words carried truth, and even those who doubted could not deny it. At last, Tora raised her hand. The council will decide in battle, not in words. When the storm comes, those who stand with me will show their choice. Those who walk away will face the enemy alone. Council ended, voices still heavy with debate. Mark walked out with Tora, the cold air of night brushing against them. He looked up at her towering figure. "You know, some of them want you gone," he said quietly. Tora nodded. "I know, but I do not rule by their whispers. I rule by strength, and strength will be tested soon." That night as the camp rested, Mark sat by the fire with Tom. His friend's eyes were tired, his face lined with worry. "Do you believe her?" Tom asked. "Do you really think she wants an alliance, or is she just using us?" Mark poked at the fire with a stick. "I think she sees something bigger. I think she knows the enemy is coming, and she knows we can't fight it alone." Tom sighed. "I just hope we live long enough to find out." The next morning, scouts returned with grim news. An enemy fleet had landed beyond the mountains. Smoke rose in the distance, black lines in the sky. The enemy was not one tribe, but many, united by a single purpose to crush Tora and anyone who stood with her. The camp filled with noise. Warriors sharpened blades, armor was strapped, banners were raised. The air buzzed with tension, like the sky before a storm. Tora gathered her warriors at the great fire. Her voice thundered across the camp. "The enemy comes. They think we are weak. They think we are divided. But today we show them wrong. Today we show them the strength of our hand." The crowd roared, weapons lifted high. But Mark noticed the unease in some faces, the doubt still burning in their eyes. Later, Tora called him to her side. "You will not stay behind," she told him. "You will fight." Mark blinked. "You want me in the battle?" "Yes," she said firmly. "If you are mine, then you fight with me. Your courage must be seen, not hidden." Out. Mark nodded slowly. Fear churned in his stomach, but he pushed it down. "Then I'll fight." The day of battle came. The sky was dark with smoke, the ground trembling under the march of thousands. Mark stood with Tora's warriors on the ridge, looking down at the enemy below. They stretched across the valley like a black sea, banners waving, weapons gleaming. Tom and the squad stood near Mark, their rifles ready. They were few compared to the endless tide below, but they stood firm. The horn sounded. The battle began. The enemy charged, their roars echoing. Tora raised her axe high, her voice like thunder. Forward. The ground shook as her warriors surged. Mark ran with them, his rifle firing bursts of light. The clash came like a storm. Steel met steel, voices cried out. The air filled with smoke and dust. Mark fought beside warriors far larger than him. But his speed and sharp aim made him valuable. He ducked under a blade, fired at close range, and rolled aside before another strike could land. Around him, the aliens fought with brutal strength, their weapons smashing through enemy lines, but the enemy was countless. They pressed hard, wave after wave. Mark's arms shook, his chest burned, but he kept fighting. He saw Tom fall and drag himself up again, refusing to give in. He saw warriors bleed, but still swing their weapons. Through the chaos, he kept sight of Tora. She was a mountain on the battlefield, her axe cleaving through enemy ranks, her voice calling her warriors to hold. She fought like 10 men, her strength unbroken, her presence a beacon, yet even she could not be everywhere. The line began to falter. The enemy pushed harder, breaking through in places. Doubt rippled through the ranks. Mark saw it, and in that moment, something rose in him. He climbed a broken stone, raised his rifle high, and shouted with all his strength, "Hold the line! Stand with her!" His voice carried sharp and clear. Warriors turned, their eyes catching his. For a moment, they saw not just a human, but one of their own, standing firm. They roared back, slamming weapons to the ground, and pushed forward with renewed strength. The line held. The battle raged. Hours passed like minutes. Dust and blood filled the air. At last, the enemy began to falter. Their waves broke against the wall of steel and fire. With one final charge, led by Tora herself, The enemy scattered, their banners falling, their cries fading into the distance. The ridge stood, scarred but unbroken. Silence followed, broken only by the heavy breaths of the survivors. Fires burned across the valley, the ground littered with broken weapons. Tora raised her axe high, her voice ringing. Victory. The camp erupted in cheers, voices loud enough to shake the mountains. Warriors lifted their weapons, shouting in triumph. Mark stood among them, his chest heaving, his body covered in dirt and sweat. He looked at Tora. She met his eyes, and for the first time he saw more than approval. He saw respect, deep and certain. That night, as the fires burned high and the camp celebrated, Tora spoke to her people. We stood as one. We fought as one. This human fought beside us, and his courage gave strength to many. He is not only mine, he is one of us. The warriors roared in agreement, their voices carrying into the night sky. Mark sat by the fire, Tom at his side, listening to the thunder of the camp. He felt the weight of what had happened settle in his chest. He was no longer just a human trying to survive. He was part of something larger, bound not by chains, but by choice. And though the enemy had been defeated, he knew the war was not over. The storm had only begun. Dawn broke with a faint orange glow across the horizon. The air was still, but the weight of what was to come pressed on everyone. Mark stood at the edge of the ridge, looking out over the valley below. The enemy forces had regrouped overnight, returning in greater numbers. This time their purpose was not merely to test Tora, they intended to destroy everything in her, camp, and end any hope of alliance between humans and aliens. Tom adjusted his rifle beside him. They're bigger than yesterday, he muttered, his voice low but tense. Mark nodded, keeping his gaze steady. Yes, but we've grown stronger too. They underestimate us. Below them, Tora moved among her warriors, her presence commanding, her axe glinting in the morning sun. Even towering over the humans, she moved with a rhythm that suggested absolute control. Her people looked to her with loyalty, some mixed with fear, but all carried the courage of one who had faced countless battles before. Mark's squad gathered, taking position near the flank of the ridge. Unlike before, they now had an unspoken place among the warriors. The humans' speed, tactics, and ingenuity complemented the aliens' brute strength. Mark had learned their ways, and they had learned his. Together, they formed a united front. A signal horn sounded from the enemy lines, deep and hollow. The ground vibrated with their charge. Waves of soldiers, both alien and human-shaped, streamed toward the ridge. Their weapons gleamed, their shouts rose like thunder. Tora raised her axe. Hold your ground. Today we fight not only for our lives but for our people. Let them remember that the hand of Tora is unbroken. The warriors roared, pounding weapons on shields and armor. Mark felt a surge of energy, his fear replaced by focus. He looked at Tom and nodded. Let's show them what we can do. The first clash came with a roar. Enemy forces hit the front lines hard, but the combined strength of Tora's warriors and the humans held them at bay. Mark fired his rifle with precision, picking off targets that tried to slip past the front. He ducked, rolled, and moved with agility the larger aliens could not match. Beside him, Tora swung her axe with relentless force. Each strike sent enemies flying back. Her movements were so fast for her size that they seemed like a storm, unpredictable and unstoppable. Mark realized that her strength was more than muscle, it was instinct, honed over countless battles. Hours passed and the valley became a whirlwind of smoke, dust, and steel. Mark's arms ached, his legs burned, and his uniform was soaked with sweat and dirt. Still, he kept moving, keeping close to Tora, anticipating her needs, watching for gaps in the enemy lines. At one point, a group of enemy warriors broke through the center. They were massive, wielding double-bladed axes and shields as tall as men. Mark saw Tora struggle to reach them in time. He charged, firing bursts from his rifle. His aim was precise, forcing them to hesitate. The delay was enough for Tora to swing her axe, cleaving through their line. Together, human and aliens struck as one, the enemy retreating before their combined strength. Tom shouted in amazement. "You're working together like one mind." Mark did not respond. His focus was total. He could feel Tora's eyes on him intermittently, acknowledging his actions without words. He realized she trusted him to act, and he realized that he trusted her in return. Their bond had grown beyond survival. It had become unspoken coordination. It's instinctive and vital. Midday arrived, and the enemy seemed endless. Yet the unity of Tora's warriors, bolstered by Mark's guidance and the human sharpshooting, held the line. Mark noticed that some of the doubting warriors now followed him instinctively. Inspired by the courage of a human standing beside the warlord, suddenly, a massive figure appeared at the enemy's front. Taller than most of their own warriors, its armor black and jagged. A commander, clearly the enemy's strongest, bellowed orders and charged directly toward Tora. The ground shook under each step. Mark's heart tightened. He knew this would be the true test. If Tora fell, the line could collapse. He raised his rifle and took aim, but he also knew he could not stop this threat alone. Tora met the enemy commander head-on. Their clash shook the ground. Sparks flew from metal, striking metal, echoing across the valley. She swung her axe with unstoppable force, but the commander was skilled, countering every blow with equal power. Mark moved closer, signaling to a group of allied warriors. They attacked the flanks of the enemy commander, forcing him to divert attention. Still, he pressed forward, and Tora was pushed back slightly. Mark realized what he had to do. Using speed, he ran to a nearby stone outcropping, climbed to higher ground, and fired directly at the enemy commander. Each shot struck, but the armor held. He switched tactics, luring the commander toward a narrow pass where the terrain would limit his movements. Tora saw his signal. With a sharp nod, she used the terrain to her advantage, swinging her axe to unbalance the enemy commander. Mark fired in coordination, distracting and hitting weak points, till finally, with a massive swing, Tora sent the commander crashing into the rocks. The enemy line faltered instantly. Without their leader, organization collapsed. Tora's warriors pressed forward, pushing the enemy back. Humans and aliens together became unstoppable. Mark found himself in the center of the charge, firing, dodging, striking when necessary. Every step he took, he felt the rhythm of the battlefield. Moving as one with Tora's force, hours later as the sun began to set, the enemy was broken. Survivors fled into the distant hills, their banners lowered, their weapons abandoned. The valley was filled with smoke, shattered banners, and the cheers of the victorious. Tora raised her axe high, bloodied but unbroken. Her voice rang across the valley. "We stand. We survive. We are one hand, and no force can break us." The warriors cheered, some lifting Mark on their shoulders. Shouting his name alongside Tora's, he felt an incredible mixture of exhaustion, relief, and pride. He had survived the final battle, fought alongside a being many thought impossible to face, and lived to see victory. Later that night, as the fires burned across the camp, Tora approached Mark. Her armor was scorched, her face streaked with dirt, but her eyes glowed with approval. "You stood with me," she said. "You fought as one of my warriors. You are mine, but you are more. You are one of us." "Right." Mark bowed slightly. "Thank you. I could not have done it alone. Not without your strength." Tora's gaze softened for the first time. We needed each other. This is how bonds are made, not with words, but with courage and action. Tom and the other humans gathered nearby, watching in awe. The humans had survived, and in the process, had become part of something larger than themselves. They had earned a place among warriors whose strength seemed limitless. The camp celebrated. But Mark knew the battles ahead would not always be like this. He looked at Tora, towering and commanding, and understood that the alliance they had forged today would shape the future of both human and alien worlds. When the celebration settled, Mark stood with Tora on a ridge overlooking the valley. The sun had set, leaving the sky painted in shades of red and gold. Silence stretched between them, but it was comfortable. It's full of unspoken understanding. You could have killed me, Mark said softly. Why didn't you? Tora's eyes glowed faintly. Because courage cannot be measured by fear. You faced it willingly. That is why you live. That is why you stand with me. Mark nodded. And I will stand with you again whenever needed. Then you are truly mine. Not as a prize, not as a weapon, but as one who belongs beside me. Together, we are stronger than any who oppose us. Mark looked at the horizon, feeling the truth of her words. The Warlord had crushed his blade the first day, claiming him as hers, and in doing so, had begun a bond that neither human nor alien could break. The night sky filled with stars, endless and bright as if the universe itself was watching. Mark knew that their story was far from over, but for the first time, he felt certain of something profound. He had faced fear, fought impossible odds, and stood beside a being who was not only terrifying but extraordinary. And in that moment, as the fires burned below and the stars shone above, Mark understood what it meant to belong not to a person, not to a place, but to a cause greater than himself. He was hers. And through that claim, he had become part of something unbreakable. The camp celebrated through the night, but Mark felt calm, knowing that together they could face anything. Tora's hand, strong and unyielding, had shaped the path ahead, and he would follow it, not as a prisoner, but as a warrior, as an ally, and as one who had earned his place beside the 11-foot alien warlord who had claimed him.